Welcome to the CS Week Women in Utilities webinar series. I'm Lisa Collins with CS Week, and I'll be your moderator today. Just a reminder to join us for CS Week in Conference 41, just a few weeks away, May 22nd through the 26th at the Fort Worth Convention Center in Fort Worth, Texas. We record these programs, and they will be available for playback along with our other archive presentations. You'll find this one later this afternoon under the Women Utilities tab from the Webinars drop-down menu from our homepage. Attendees are encouraged to upload questions to the Q&A panel as they arise. However, we will hold them till the end of the presentation. So if you would please address your question to all panelists so that we will all see them. So they will be asked at the end of the session. Today's webinar is Building Legacies, Women Who Lead, Serve, and Inspire. And our speaker is Lila Jaber. Lila is a perpetual champion for diversifying a talented workforce. In her third decade of regulatory policy and government practice, she leads Gunster's government affairs practice, as well as serves as the firm's regional managing shareholder. Notably, Lila is also the architect of the Florida Women in Energy Leadership Forum. It's a group focused on highlighting the workforce and economic development contributions of the electric and natural gas industries in the state. She is dedicated to providing strategic and regulatory advice to clients on a number of business and economic development issues. Lila is fluent in English and Arabic, is an experienced speaker and presenter, and she has testified before Florida's legislature, the Florida Cabinet, the United States Department of Treasury, and the United States Senate Committee on Commerce. As former chair of the Florida Public Service Commission, she served 2 terms as both commissioner and chairman, overseeing the state's implementation of economic regulatory policy and procedure for the energy, natural gas, water, and telecommunications industry. And it's my pleasure to welcome Lila to our presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate the opportunity, and I also acknowledge Andrea Pelt-Thornton for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you today. So we'll attempt to keep this short and yet address what I've been asked to do, which is to talk a little bit about my personal background and the journey to get to the PSC, and a little bit about what we do now, and at the same time try to address questions that we all get about work-life balance. So I'll try to accommodate all of that and certainly invite people to ask questions at the very end. But this title is actually the title that I need to give the Tallahassee community credit for. I recently did a similar presentation to Tallahassee Community College in their beginning of a women leadership program in the Tallahassee community. And it was interesting. I found myself looking in my history to understand where I am now, and certainly the way I govern myself in my work. And there's a lot of perspective that's gained when you do a little bit of self-reflection. And in that regard, to explain my management style and hopefully all the skill sets we bring to the table, I have to reflect on, you want to change the slide? I had to reflect on my personal history and just a little bit about myself. So I am Arab American. I'm first generation American. And that wonderful woman on the right of me, this is my other life. This wonderful woman on the right of me is my sister, who is 18 years older than I am, born and raised in Old Palestine. And she had to be pulled out of high school, could not finish school, and she and my mother were not allowed to go to school. So I say all of that to kind of help everyone understand the perspective and the background, and sometimes the responsibility we each feel personally to do really well, not just for ourselves and for our current family, but to honor the legacy of others before us. And we all have a personal story. This is mine, but it explains who we are. But all of us have personal stories. That wonderful girl on the right of me is my 13-year-old daughter, and she's the one that has inspired the topic here. So in one of the ways that I address the balance of work and personal life is I make sure when I'm in town, you hear this from many women professionals, when I'm in town, I insist on taking her to school in the morning. Much of it to listen to what she's doing in school and to understand who her friends are and what she's doing, but I find myself learning more from her than I think that I'm able to teach her. And this particular morning, as we were preparing to go to school, she was in an argument with her brother, and we got in the car, and I started talking to her about patience and leading by example and what she needed to do or not do with her 10-year-old brother. And we always play a game. When I want her to remember something, we come up with an acronym. And that particular day, after talking to her about patience and character and having compassion with her brother, I said, you know what, Aisha, pick. Let's talk about pick. And I said, you know, patience, integrity, compassion, character, and humility. I said, you know, you're 13 and you really, really need to remember the trait of humility. And she teased me. Some of you on the phone have met my 13-year-old daughter, and so you know she's got a great sense of humor. And she said, Mom, you're Arabic. It's pih. So this is the pih leadership presentation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed her that morning. So patience. You know, what are those leadership best practices? And you want to change the slide? And so P, patience. We all know this to be true. We know that the most valuable thing we bring to anything to the table, whether it's our personal life or our profession or how we lead our organization, it's patience. And so, but when I talk about patience, I'm not talking about, you know, in my mother's time where the mentality was good things come to those who wait, because it is absolutely true that leaders are required to exercise patience, but they have to still move things forward. So we don't have the luxury of waiting for things to happen. Sometimes we have to drive those projects, goals, and businesses forward. So the question then becomes, as we focus on those individual goals, how do we exercise patience but yet do what is required? Slide. So here's what I mean by that. One of the questions I was asked to address was, you know, how did I get appointed to the PSC? What was my journey to the PSC? And for me, this is the best example I can share with you related to patience. The way the Public Service Commission appointment process works is there's a nominating council that is organized by the members of the legislature. And at the time I applied to the PSC, I was a PSC staff attorney at the Florida Public Service Commission in the water and wastewater section. Not exactly the most popular part of the industry or of the PSC, but critical nevertheless. And so I wanted to be a PSC commissioner. I knew that I could do it. I knew that that was my goal. And so a year and a half, I traveled the state and met with every single nominating council member to allow them to get to know me. I knew it would be a lengthy process. I knew that I wasn't their traditional political candidate or someone that had the relationships already, so I had to let them get to know me. So that was the first thing I did. The second thing I did is I went ahead and applied to get my name out there, knowing that I really didn't have a chance to be appointed. All that to say, if you look at these bullet points, it's an example of being strategic in the application of what you want. And so what do I mean by being strategic? I identified the goal. I created the strategy. And the strategy can be multi-layered. And I had to know the material better than anyone else. And finally, I had to be prepared to make the ask. So in that year and a half of getting to know the PSC nominating council members, on my third visit to the chair of the nominating council, he finally looked at me and said, you know, you have a fire in your belly, and that fire in your belly will serve you well on the PSC. You have my support. And I didn't know then what I know now and how I'm describing it to you, but as I reflect back on that experience and in everything I've tried to do, certainly with my practice and with this office, it's identifying the goal, creating the strategy. You have to know the material better than anyone else, and you've got to make the ask. Now, in so doing, so then you have to exercise a thoughtfulness in the approach. Next slide. And what I mean by thoughtfulness, it's not just your please and your thank you. It's a thoughtful implementation of making the ask to the person who can make the decision. So identifying the decision makers. And in that, if I had sub-bullet points under this, I would tell you it's so important to identify the decision maker to ensure discretion. You know, as you think of your office environment, as I think about my own office, you don't walk around and necessarily speak about your goal or what you're trying to do or what you'd like the group to do to all the people in the office, because one, you're being thoughtful with their time, but you're ensuring the discretion. And you're not wasting your time or others. And frankly, you're also in a position where you're not offending the actual decision maker. Second, thoughtfulness comes in effectively communicating the message. You know, we always hear our counterparts or others say to us, don't send mixed signals. So there's a thoughtfulness in really understanding what it is you want to communicate and doing so effectively. And the last one, and this is hard. This one is hard, being prepared for the negative. And so what I mean for the negative, be prepared that the answer might be no, or it could be different than what you expected. It doesn't make it a wrong answer. It's just being prepared for what happens next when you get a no. Next slide. So let's say you have the strategy and application, you're thoughtfully communicating the message to the correct people, but you get a no. And so my next category under patience is to know when you have to regroup, refine, or recalibrate. So accepting the feedback and incorporating under regroup. I've made the ask. I've got to understand the feedback that I've been given. And either I make the modifications that have been suggested, or I come back with additional information, or maybe I've made the ask and I've been offered something that looks a little bit different than what I had in mind or what the project solution I thought was appropriate. And it's understanding that maybe the alternative is just fine. And then, of course, under patience, knowing when to let something go. Slides. So pick P, patience. I is integrity. There are all kinds of leaders, you know, and there's disagreement about this, and I'm certainly no leadership expert, but I heard conversation and speeches along the way in my career about how there are all kinds of leaders, and you know, the bull in the china shop is a leader. It might not be the leader that we all want to work with or for or be part of their organization, but in their own way, they're exercising leadership. The difference, though, between a successful leader and the bull in the china shop leader is how they measure their integrity, whether they have integrity, and whether you can buy into the vision that they have because you question their integrity. So for me over the years, for me over the years, again, in self-reflection and in watching the career of others, I've noticed that all of our integrity is shaped by the experiences we've had personally or by the experiences we've gained watching others. So over the years, I've developed a simple test for myself, sort of the looking yourself in the mirror. Does it pass that smell test? Does it make you comfortable? Does the decision you've made help you sleep at night? Will it keep you up at night? So, you know, simply stated, do your actions reflect the values you have or the values you want to project? Second thing I ask, are you doing the right things for the right reason? This is that ego test. You know, am I asking for this? Am I pushing this forward on my behalf or on behalf of the team because it's the right thing to do? And is our intention correct? If 1 and 2 are adequate, then you can't help but to earn trust, loyalty, and find success. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about success. It's different for all of us. It's not necessarily financial success. It may be project success. It may be a promotion success. It may be an argument success, pushing an ideal forward, an idea forward. So success is defined differently. But if I have found that if 1 and 2 are sufficient, then the rest follows. You earn trust, you have the loyalty of the team, and you get success, whatever that means to you. critical component of leadership, the next slide, character. We all know character influences our careers, and we all have friends and colleagues that are characters, but that doesn't make them leaders. And so what do I mean by character? Someone who's got the mutual respect, understanding the positions of others, understanding the issues and concerns of others, and having the back and forth and the willingness to hear those positions, mutual respect. Civility, the willingness to engage in civil discourse, civil conversations. I have to give credit here to a former colleague of mine from a previous firm he was an elected city commissioner in the city of Tallahassee, Alan Katz. In the end of his political career, he used the money he raised to start an organization called Village Square. And the whole concept, which has now been replicated over the years, the whole concept was if you took a Republican leader and you took a Democrat leader and you put them in the same room with other Democrats and an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, put them in a room to talk about those issues of importance to the state, what would happen? Isn't that the group that could lead by example? That concept has become known as the Village Square, and it has in fact been replicated all over the state. When I think about how he started the organization and where it has taken itself, and now even into Missouri where he currently lives, that's a perfect example of promoting civility to make good things happen in your community. Thought leadership. We want people that we can respect, have the utmost respect for, provide thought leadership. And it could be an issue important to them. It could be an issue important to the organization or to the state. But we've all heard over the years, if you have something good to say, if you have something great to contribute, do it. That thought leadership. And then finally, we all love to laugh. Bringing humor and laughter to a job or to a team effort just really makes everyone more productive, and it allows one another to get to know one another. And so I have definitely tried to use humility, humor, and laughter as a way to move things forward. And then finally, the C for compassion. Next slide. You know, it wasn't that long ago, and we know this to be true, it wasn't that long ago that women thought they only could be strong in a workplace environment. They couldn't show emotion. Or with regard to men, there's nothing that we're going to talk about today that doesn't equally apply to our male counterparts, but you know, that you have to be firm in a workplace and not show any sort of weakness. And in many regards, being kind or compassionate back then was a form of weakness. I don't believe that to be the case. And so I think critical to leadership is compassion. I think it's required. And you can still be compassionate and show results. You can still be compassionate and lead your organization and earn respect and foster respect. And of course, all of that can be implied and used and still achieve success. Again, whatever success means in your particular example. So taking the time to know those around you, investing in the personal relationships and in the goal of others, I think it's critical. If you know what's on the mind of your team members, you're in a position to understand where to distribute the work, understand where the right skill sets are for a given project, and understand how to make and facilitate a more productive environment. And the reality is, if you have an understanding of your team that way, or your employer or an employee, they are much more inclined to be supportive when you're not having your best day. That doesn't make you less of a leader or a weaker leader. It actually, I think, it's been my experience, makes you more of an effective leader. Slide. So here's what I mean by compassion. If I had to think about the things that someone else would say, you know, she's there when you need her. What would they mean by that? I think people deserve candor. So under effective communication, I always err on the side of candor. It's a thoughtful candor. But people will always say to you, if you just tell me what's expected of me. And so I think people deserve to know what is expected of them in a project, in the job, in the role. Understanding the expectations helps them rise to the occasion or tweak the expectation, or again, understanding where to match other skill sets to make sure that everyone is lifted at the same time. And then I think under effective communication comes holding everyone accountable, including yourself. So I'd say it's critical. I think letting people know what is expected of them, how they will be measured, and holding everyone accountable is the best practice here. Flexibility in the workforce. So if a person can't make an 8 a.m. meeting, why does it, you have to think as a leader, why does it have to be an 8 a.m. meeting? Can it be a 9:30 meeting? Can it be something other than a lunch meeting? I have found in my professional environment that having those 9:30 meetings instead of the 8 a.m. meetings means that when I have to call at 7 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, my phone call will get answered. And so when you have the emergency situations that are that happen, you will find the resources and the team that you need because you have shown that you can be flexible. Acknowledgement. Good job. Good job. Great job. Really appreciate how you've handled that. Giving the acknowledgement when you know they've tried their best, and even if you know something could have been handled better, giving the acknowledgement and waiting for the appropriate time where the other feedback can also be incorporated, but being the positive first. Giving credit, understanding that credit has to be given to ensure teamwork and loyalty. Creating opportunity. I think we can't talk about this enough. I think that if you are in a position in your organization, regardless of what that organization is, to create opportunity for others is a wonderful thing for their own growth, but it also shows the rest of the team that if people work really, really hard, opportunity is created and it's shared. I don't think any of us lose anything by doing that. I think as leaders we owe it to those that we work with, but frankly I learn every time an opportunity is created. So watching others grow, I think, is a bullet point under compassion. And what they do or don't do with that opportunity is up to them. But you should never be the one that stands in the way of it. And show up. What I mean by show up is show up to anything that you can possibly show up to that your team asks of you. So it could be a letter of a recommendation. It could be helping them be appointed to something. It can be giving them the opportunity that they've requested to be part of a team or a project. Or sometimes it's to get a different job. But show up. It could be a wedding of a child. It could be attending a family event. Showing up shows them, again, the compassion that you're not just a work colleague, but their extended family. After all, we spend more time with the people we work with than with our own family. And that brings us to H slide for humility. Just as I believe integrity is a critical component of leadership, I also believe humility is critical. And so, there are a lot of energy CEOs, and we can name them on this call. I love the energy CEOs that, but for the fact that they are a president or a CEO or a director, but for the fact that when they walk in the room, others don't necessarily know. There's a humility that some of them have that really just makes you want to work with them. And as I think about, well, what do I mean by that? It's not just that unassuming mindset that they have, but they're not afraid to admit mistakes. There's a grace that they've learned and earned with failure. They practice self-reflection. That's the person who will always ask, what could we have done better? Have we reflected on what we can do better? It's okay to get out of the way, avoid micromanaging. This is very hard, especially when you know what's being asked of you is critical. But if we've given our team members the opportunity and we've provided all the tools necessary that they need in their toolbox, then I think we have to get out of the way and let them do what they need to do. A little bit related, tending to the needs of others. You know, I think that that's what some of our team members need. They need the opportunity to handle something independently. And we tease around here that we are a we firm. So the question, are you a we person or are you an I person? We people, I think, always go further in any organization. The team camaraderie, the collegiality is always more welcome. And then finally, keep an open mind to different opinions. So what does your table look like? And that's not just your board table. That's not having a seat at the board table, but who is your network of folks that will really tell you what you need to hear, not just what you want to hear? And there's a humility in being able to listen to them and evaluating that feedback that you're getting and really adjusting what it is you're about to do or what you're not doing. So diversity is key, I think, in understanding humility. Slide. So I tease, my parents were born in Salwad, Ramallah, Palestine, which literally is a village. So here, our folks always tease me about one of the key phrases I say all the time: it takes a village to do what we do. So for me, I mean, it is literal. There was a village that helped all of us. So I'd like to think that we never forget where we came from, and even though we know where we want to go, but we never forget where we came from. So the idea to remember that there was a village that helped all of us get to where we are, I think, you know, it's a tremendous opportunity to honor those that whose backs we were on, and it's not an opportunity to waste. All of that said, all of that said, we can't do everything. And so what I've learned over the years, which I wasn't always good at growing up in this profession, is to really pick the one or two things that I wanted to do so that we could do it really, really well. And one of those things in the professional environment is the Big Bend Minority Chamber. A few years ago, a friend of mine here in Tallahassee and I started a minority chamber of commerce focused on a 5-county area here in the Panhandle, with the idea that we would bring more attention to minority-owned businesses, minority and women-owned businesses in the 5-county area. We are in our 5th year now. And the second initiative I started last year, it's the Florida's Women in Energy Leadership Forum. Over the years, the energy industry have said to me that it's hard to attract women into the electric and natural gas industries, and I stored that away until last year, where we developed a dialogue around celebrating the highest-ranking women in the energy industry, bringing attention to the substance of what they do, and also have students in the room so that we could move the dial by bringing students into the energy environment in the hopes that they would be interested in the career and subsequently be hired. And slide. And so we're in our 2nd year, and the second forum will be in Palm Beach on June 14th through the 16th. If you have interest, I would encourage you to go to the website, flwomeninEnergy.com. It is a program designed to focus on the substance of energy in the idea of promoting the industry to potential workforce. We've got keynote speakers that include Tom Fanning from Southern Company, Gordon Gillette from TECO Energy, and Commissioner Adam Putnam from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. So A little bit about myself, a little bit about PIC leadership, and a little bit about the Florida's Women in Energy Leadership Forum. I'd love to entertain any questions that you all might have.
Well, thank you, Lila. That was very, I love that. That was very good. So we've had a couple of questions come in. Let's see, start with, you've got, it says, what are the changes that you've seen throughout the years in the regulatory arena related to diversity in workforce?
So when I was appointed to the PSC, it's been 16 years since that time. The room looked very different than it would today. Very often I was the only woman in the room, not just on the bench, but also in the utility industry. You know, obviously I'm pleased to say the dial has been moved and that's no longer the case, but I remember walking down the aisle of the PSC from where the audience sits, instead of coming from the bench, coming from the back room to sit on the bench, just so I would be comfortable, frankly, walking through that room, but also so that others would see that I was comfortable walking through that room. So, you know, thankfully now when you go to a PSC meeting, it's a nice, diverse group of people, but that was only 16 years ago. So I do see some changes. I see it, frankly, in our clients. I see it in the client context. More and more women. I think we have more work to do, but it is definitely more diverse than it used to be.
Very good. We've had another question that's kind of following up on your addressing work-life balance. Are there any other key factors that you would like to address about work-life balance and how you accomplish that?
I do not take work at home. Once I'm home, I'm home. You have to be able to do that. So the phone comes off unless there's an emergency, obviously. People can find me if there's an emergency, but I really do spend the quality time with the kids and my husband. When I'm home, I'm home. There's also one day, the weekend, when everything is turned off and it's family time. And as I mentioned earlier, making sure I take my daughter in particular to school. This is, 13 is that age where it's very critical to be paying attention to what's going on. And so and I have to tell you, I even don't like the word balance. I don't think things are necessarily balanced ever for me. It's what the priority is in a given day. But, faith and family always have to come first, at least in my life, and I have found that to be true with anyone who does this at the pace we do it. Anyone who does it successfully, I have found that they say the same thing, that you understand your priorities and you understand that it's not really a balance, that sometimes work will be a little bit more important, and there will be a soccer game that I miss, but you'd like to think that you were there when it counts.
Exactly. I agree with you on that point. So we had another question come in, and I want to follow up with this question as well. It's a question I typically hear a lot. This one says, do you have a mentor, and how has this person helped you? But I also want to ask, did you have a champion? Because I find having a mentor and a champion being two different roles. So I'm just curious how you interpret that.
They really are. You actually took the words out of my mouth. I appreciate your recognizing the distinction. I have always seen a distinction. We have here in my own firm a mentorship program, and I don't find them effective. I think when you designate a mentor for someone, it doesn't work. I think each of us, we will find our own mentor. I actually believe I've had champions throughout my whole life. Someone who will champion your efforts, someone who will champion your initiative, someone who will champion you and put you forward. I will tell you my biggest weakness in everything I do is I can be everyone else's champion and put others forward when it comes to something that I personally might want. It is a struggle for me, as it is for many other people. So the idea of having a champion is absolutely critical for people like me who struggle with that. So I don't think I've had mentors in the definitional sense. We all talk about mentors. I think I've been blessed with a lot of champions in my life. And I think to the degree we find a mentor, it's because we have found a mentor. I really haven't, it's not been my experience that when we designate a mentor for someone else that there really is a click between them that works.
Definitely. And I think it's hard, too, for I see more informal mentoring, but also to actually make the ask of someone to be a mentor, because I think it's the two-way street that if you go seek them, then you must give something back, too. And maybe folks are a little bit, hesitant to make that ask of someone. I don't know. That's just a little tidbit that I've seen a couple times, a few. But I do think the champion is the piece that is important.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, to go back to the point about showing up, it takes a lot. It really takes a lot for someone to come see you and ask you to champion something or to ask you to do anything for them. It's hard. And so in that arena of showing up, you have to step back and recognize that that person who's come to see you to make the ask, you owe them to show up. And if there is a legitimate reason you can't support them or you can't be there, then we owe them candor. But showing up is so important. And, whether that's showing up as a champion, showing up as the manager, showing up as the colleague, it's something we live by here. I personally live by. And I have found that I learn more and gain more than I'm even giving.
Exactly. I find that refreshing, too. Well, I'm curious, as if there's another question that came through, and I'm curious about it, too, is looking back, is there something that the younger you wishes you had known or that someone would have shared with you then that would have made the path a little easier, or maybe even changed the trajectory just a little?
I don't know that it would have changed the trajectory, but I do wish my younger self understood humility a little bit more. Not to say, I really do believe people that knew me, in my 20s and 30s wouldn't have said that I was not humble. I think I appreciate more now than I did then. So I will give you an example of humility. I did not know that when I was learning the alphabet in elementary school that I was also teaching my mother, who was not allowed to go to school. My mother had no education, and I actually am the one that taught her how to write her name. I reflect on that now, and I actually, in preparing not this presentation, but when I was giving it to Tallahassee Community College, I wanted to go back and find her signature, which was really not a signature. It was her name printed in all caps. That's the way she learned how to write her name, because that's the way I taught her. When I was 5, 6, 7, teaching her that, as any child, right? I was a child, as any child would. I remember being frustrated every time she asked me to come and practice with her. Today, at 50, I recognize that's a very humbling experience, and I know that even sharing it with a group like this may sound odd, but it is a self-reflection, and those are the kinds of regrets that I have, that I didn't know enough to consider those, humbling experiences in my life. So those are really the moments I reflect back on. I don't think it would have changed anything that I did or didn't do. I think I just would have appreciated what I had at the moment at any given time.
Those moments so much. Well, that's very good. Lila, don't have any other questions in the queue right now. Is there perhaps something else that you would like to share with us for a moment or two while we wait to see if any more questions come through, or
only to wish
more about? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. Only to wish each of you success. It's wonderful to have women in the energy industry. It is wonderful to have a collegial experience like this. You know, I certainly offer myself to any of you. I'm only a phone call away. But it is very, very refreshing to see initiatives like this. It's also wonderful to see the organization that Andrea and others are part of, the ABE, Association of Blacks in Energy. I do believe that we all learn from each other and we can all champion each other. And I also would remind everyone that you can't move the dial without having our male counterparts and other leaders in the room. So it is not an effort that is women specific. It's organization and professional specific. So congratulations to each of you, and hopefully we all do good things together going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lila. We appreciate having you here. So as we get ready to close, just a quick note before we sign off. I want to say to all the attendees that thank you for being here and joining us today, that we also want to remind you of the Women in Utilities reception at CS Week in Fort Worth, and that will be Tuesday, May 23rd at 6:15 to 7:15, Ballroom C. And I also want to thank our sponsor, AAC Utility Partner, and for the webinar series, and Lila and Andrea too. We appreciate all of you for being here, and at this moment we'll conclude the webinar. Thank you.